The only ones who gods care about is themselves.
So this is my vow.
All gods will die.
After finding a way of making Thor work with Thor Ragnarok, Taika Waititi returns with Thor, Love and Thunder. But the big question on everyone's mind is, will lightning strike twice? Well, we all asked for more and we got it. The gang's all back from Thor Ragnarok, including Tessa Thompson, Chris Hemsworth and of course writer, director, actor and all-around quirky, creative director personality Taika Waititi is also back. And we also have the return of Natalie Portman back into the fray as the God of Thunder herself, Thor, in what should be a welcome return for all involved. But unfortunately, Thor 4 left me wanting more. Shit, I'm like MC Hammer with those rhymes. I want to say right off the bat, normally I'm a fan of Taika Waititi's work. I mean, Flight of the Conchords, What We Do in the Shadows, Hunt for the Wilder People, Jojo Rabbit, and of course Ragnarok, and that's just to name a few. Those are all examples of work from him that I've really enjoyed. But it feels like he's popping up all over the place lately and that his shtick and persona is starting to wear a little bit thin. I don't want to blame it all on his performance in Free Guy, but it certainly didn't help.
Taika Waititi takes an already funny script and is riffing on a level that is freaking sublime.
What you talking about, Willis?
It seems like his style of comedy is getting a bit stale and predictable. It's bordering on annoying by now. It really seems like since he's kind of gotten big in Hollywood that he's steered more into the lol so random humour and away from some of the sincerity and sweetness of some of his earlier work. And it's getting hella annoying. And I think after this film, unfortunately for me, the Emperor is truly wearing no clothes.
Oh, you flipped too hard, damn it!
Like I said, I enjoyed Thor Ragnarok, and yeah, it was pretty funny, but it fit into the usual Marvel style. And I do think while it was quite silly, there were also some serious stakes to the film. I mean, Thor lost his hammer, his father, and his home. And the movie played that pretty seriously. It knew when to balance comedy and drama. It wasn't like every character was putting on a straight man act, but they kind of went for one or two quips. And they weren't really practicing their, set for a comedy club. And there was, generally speaking, a good story to hang those jokes on. As opposed to just having a load of jokes and then trying to find a story that's trying to break out from behind those jokes. And yeah, you can probably now see some of the criticisms I'm going to throw at Thor Love and Thunder. And I guess now is as good a time as any to drop the hammer. A common complaint against Marvel movies is that there's too many jokes. And while I don't think that's a valid criticism in general, I feel it certainly applies here. And the problem is that there isn't a straight man to play it all off.
Okay. So gay.
I didn't mean it like that. But okay, take Guardians of the Galaxy for example. Drax isn't trying to be funny. His literal interpretation and how deadpan he is what we get humour from. Gamora, we get a few laughs out of her because she's being incredibly serious in an otherwise ridiculous situation. And that's low-key funny. Not everyone in the Guardians of the Galaxy is trying to make us laugh. Whereas in this film, Thor is quipping and trying to get jokes in. Valkyrie is cracking wise. Jane Foster is wacky superhero and isn't that funny too. And Korg, who's meant to be the comedic relief, is now surrounded by comedic relief. And because of that, his jokes are also not funny. And I think the biggest problem in general and biggest criticism I can throw at the film is that it felt like it tried way more to get laughs in this than any other Marvel movie. And I laughed less at it than I did at Ragnarok and plenty of other Marvel movies. I mean, hey, do you like screaming goats? Haha, lol, internet humor, so random, remember? That was popular like 10 years ago. Are you laughing? Are you laughing? Are you laughing? Screaming goats, I'll do it again, I'm laughing now. It might sound pedantic to give out about a Marvel movie not being serious. I'm already seeing people online saying, you don't get it. Don't think about it. It's a comedy. Just laugh. Don't think about it. To which I say this. The MCU's success has hinged on fans being invested in the story and the characters and thinking about the world they occupy. Its success literally hinges on that. We have a character called the God Butcher who's going around wiping out all the gods and kidnapping children. That sort of feels like something that should be serious and that we should care about. But if our lead characters don't care about it and are happy to just joke and fuck around, then I guess it doesn't matter. So if it doesn't matter, why should we care? It's a film at odds with itself in that regard. There's some strong dramatic scenes here, especially featuring Christian Bale as Gorr the God Butcher. When he's in it, it's really strong dramatic stuff. But of course, that's in isolation. Anytime he has to occupy space with the rest of the characters, it feels like the film has to quickly change tact, and it's incredibly janky. The best scenes in the film, for me, featured Gorr the God Butcher, and I thought that Christian Bale really gave it his all and swung for the fences. But if you're expecting to see the God Butcher do some actual God butchering, you're going to be disappointed. Which is a shame, because that would have been friggin' cool. I thought Natalie Portman as Jane Foster, the mighty Thor, was decent enough. I'm not entirely sure I'm satisfied with the explanation for her becoming Thor. I just felt a little bit rushed to me. And of course, based on her character going through chemotherapy, having cancer, there are some intimate emotional scenes from her that are okay. Again, it's jarring for their inclusion because of the rest of the movie, and it's a shame because I do think if the movie was better as a whole, they would have stood out for the right reasons instead of standing out because they feel like they don't fit the film perfectly. Most of the Revengers are back from Ragnarok, of course, for Hulk and Loki. But Thor, of course, Chris Hemsworth is here again, really just showing his comedic side to the character, which I think is a bit of a shame, as much as I think he did a good job here, and he's a great Thor. It feels like we had a lot of drama and depth to the character after the last two Avengers, and that's kind of just thrown by the wayside to make him funny, I guess. There's a few moments, but kind of a shame. Valkyrie, Tessa Thompson's character, has nothing to do. We don't get to see her finding a queen like they said we might. We don't get to see her new duties as King of Asgard, really. In fact, it almost is insulting that as soon as Thor shows up, everyone's like, hey, what does Thor think? Thor is here, everyone. Who's that Valkyrie? Never heard of her. Come on, Thor, what do you think? She's just there to be Thor's buddy, to stand by her side. It's not the only character who gets that role, by the way. But yeah, I guess they just put her there because they thought it would be awkward for Jane and Thor to interact at first by themselves. I don't know, but yeah, totally no need for her to be here, which is a total waste of that actress and that character. More so, totally unnecessary character, Korg. He serves no purpose at all. I don't know why he's still here. In my opinion, he's totally overstayed his welcome because he doesn't serve a narrative purpose. He doesn't serve a comedic purpose because now everyone is trying to be funny. And I guess Taika Waititi just figured, hey, I'm going to be on set anyway, may as well cash another check. But no, there's no reason for him to be here. In fact, I would say every character I just named feels to me like they've regressed since their last film appearance. I nearly forgot about the Guardians of the Galaxy, which is appropriate because the film pretty much forgets about the Guardians of the Galaxy. They're barely in it, and there's no reason for them to be. But if you're hoping for some fun interactions between them and Thor, you're going to be let down. I genuinely can't even remember if all of them even have lines. But yeah, totally unnecessary addition. Total wasted opportunity. We don't even get to see them kick ass. Guard. I'm so sorry. So let's go back to tone for a sec. As I said, the comedy in this film didn't really work for me, and it is peppered throughout, which kind of damaged the film as a whole. But there are some dramatic elements that really did work. I mean, we start the film with Gorr's origin, which I did think hit the right emotional balance, even if it was kind of a bit of a rushed origin. I do think the dramatic elements really worked here. And I suppose that's easy because it is the first scene and is meant to set the tone for the film. Of course, unfortunately, the tone of the film is all over the place. I also will say the relationship scenes between Thor and Jane worked very well. Especially there's a flashback showing why their relationship kind of turned sour the first time. That was actually believable and I thought quite effective. But obviously, as mentioned, that's all undercut by constant attempts at jokes. And I really don't know what happened here, but it just wasn't amusing. And I normally find Taika's work very funny. But the film really just feels unpolished, overly improvised possibly, and just sloppy and desperate for a laugh. And I should know, not funny. I've been doing a pun counter this whole time. There are some decent action scenes to the film's credit, although I could have done with a bit more. There's a kind of a cheesy, over-the-top 80s action scene at the start that really did work. The finale has some interesting ideas and it was well executed. There's a very intense scene on a barren shadow planet that really showed the potential of this villain and of the film. It's just a shame it's not surrounded by better material because it really feels like you'd rather watch that film than this one. And I will say the film does get better in its second half, and by the last act it kind of feels like it could have worked but it's just too little too late for me. Speaking of visuals, this is a hot potato to discuss, given what's long been suspected and well documented in the last few days. Marvel seemingly put a lot of pressure on their VFX artists while giving them very unclear or inconsistent guidance and direction. And yeah, the effects in this film at times are not good. And I'm not someone who usually complains about visual effects. And if the film had me more engaged, I probably wouldn't even notice or care. But given the budget of this film, it's crazy. And it's a film that's so strange because there are moments where it is gorgeous and there is some real visual flair to scenes. But then it's coupled with some bafflingly bad shots. And the blame for this goes at Marvel, not the VFX artists, because it certainly feels like in this phase the effects of the MCU have started to slip. It feels like they're just, hey, that's good enough, let's put it out there. Ragnarok definitely lent into that 80s aesthetic, and it feels like this film wants to retain some of that. But outside of the title or a scene or two, it feels like the movie is tonally and aesthetically confused. I mean, certainly the soundtrack wants you to think 80s, but even that is so lazy. There are 4 Guns N' Roses songs on the soundtrack to this. And they're all the songs we all already know. And I think that kind of sums up the film for me. It went for the same obvious thing over and over again instead of giving us something different, unexpected, or interesting. Thor Love and Thunder is a mess. It's sloppy and poorly executed and hopes to get by on the goodwill of the MCU as a whole and Thor Ragnarok, but it doesn't. Doubles down on the jokes and the humour, which often misses its mark, and makes the film quite desperate and abrasive, while also making it tonally inconsistent. And while there is potential shown by Gorr the God Butcher and Jane Foster as Thor, they feel lost in a film that isn't sure what it wants to be. In a strange sense, it's a film that feels like it's been cut to the bone, but as a sort of contradiction, feels flabby and indulgent. And it really forces you to question whether Ragnarok was just lightning in a bottle. Ultimately, Thor 4, despite having sparks of promise, doesn't bring the thunder, and there isn't a lot to love about it.